Hey everyone, welcome back to This Is Monsters. I'm your narrator, Giles with a J. I just want to take a quick moment to let you know that we're on season 21 and the theme is strange and unusual. I feel like I might have been a little too aggressive in my previous intro and I want to make things a little more positive, so I'm going to encourage you to caress the like button and maybe hug the subscribe button. Show it some love. Don't hate. Save your hate for the monsters. On with the show. In the 1930s, Tony Marino thought he had a foolproof plan to bring in some money. He would take out life insurance on a homeless drunk and then feed him booze at his speakeasy until the man died from alcohol poisoning. He could collect the life insurance and nobody would miss the drifter who had died for the cause. Tony was sure the plan would go off without a hitch. I mean, how hard could it be to get an alcoholic to drink himself to death? This is Monsters. At the beginning of the 1930s, Tony Marino owned a speakeasy on 3rd Avenue in the Bronx. It was a tiny place that catered to those who were down on their luck, and there were plenty of those people around thanks to the Depression. Tony basically ran the place by himself, though he did employ one bartender, a man named Joseph Murphy, who went by Red. Red was homeless, so he could be found most nights sleeping on an old sofa in the speakeasy. In the early 30s, speakeasies were a dime a dozen and Tony wasn't making a lot of money with his, so he started thinking of a way he could make some extra money. That's where a woman named Mabel Carson came into the picture. Mabel came from a wealthy family but was considered the black sheep. When her mother died and her marriage failed in 1931, she moved to New York City to start over, but it seemed the Big Apple did not have the opportunities she thought it did. It wasn't long before she was living on the street, frequenting the local speakeasies. One of them was Tony Marino's. Despite Tony being married with a 1-year-old child, he started dating Mabel, though it seemed it was only to get close to her. In 1932, he took out a $2,000 life insurance policy on her, and it wasn't long before she was dead. He would claim that he came home to find her dead on the bed and the coroner would rule it an accident, but it's believed that Tony caused her death. Mabel had been battling pneumonia for days prior and it's believed that Tony got her so drunk she passed out. Then he left her naked and unconscious beside an open window during a freezing New York winter night. Tony collected the policy, which would be the equivalent of $23,000 today. Somehow, though, by the end of 1932, he was broke again. The early 1930s saw New York City devastated by the Great Depression. Unemployment soared as the average American family's annual income plummeted by 40%. In 1932 alone, over 273,000 families faced eviction nationwide. That economic collapse created a desperate environment where previously unthinkable schemes gained traction. For struggling business owners like Tony, who complained that business was bad, the financial pressures generated dangerous opportunism. With a successful insurance scam under his belt, Tony brought in more people to start carrying out the plan on a larger scale. One of those people was a man named Francis Pasqua, who went by Frank. Frank had helped Tony get a life insurance policy on Mabel, and the two had known each other for years. Frank was the one who would introduce Tony to their next victim, a man named Michael Malloy. Frank ran the local mortuary, and he gave Michael a few bucks to lend a hand. Michael would sweep and polish the caskets. After the day was over, they would head out together and hit Tony's speakeasy. Born in County Donegal, Ireland on June 5, 1885, Michael Malloy immigrated to New York City in the 1920s. The former firefighter had fallen onto hard times and descended into chronic alcoholism despite prohibition laws. Michael's daily routine eventually consisted of waiting for Tony's speakeasy to open, drinking until unconsciousness, and rarely paying his mounting bar tabs. His perpetual intoxication made him an unremarkable fixture in the Bronx underworld. When he wasn't working for Frank, he could be found sweeping alleys or collecting garbage, often accepting alcohol as payment instead of money. By 1933, he was occasionally working as a bartender at the speakeasy in order to pay off his growing tab. The detail that made Michael a good mark for Tony and his crew was the fact that he had no friends or family connections in New York. Furthermore, even basic details about him remained mysterious. His exact age was unknown, with most estimating him to be around 60. It wasn't until after researching the case that I found what's believed to be his date of birth, which would make him 47. A life of hard drinking and sleeping on the streets likely aged him. That anonymity made him the perfect mark for insurance fraud, as no one would investigate his death or question identity forgeries. Michael appeared to be an even easier target than Mabel was. He was someone whose identity could be easily falsified and whose passing would go unmourned and unquestioned. His invisibility in society, coupled with his predictable alcoholic behavior, created the perfect conditions for what the conspirators believed would be a simple murder-for-profit scheme. By the end of 1932, Tony was becoming more and more financially stressed. He gathered together with a group of men and they began planning more insurance scams. The group included speakeasy barman Red Murphy, Frank Pasqua, and Daniel Kreisberg, a local grocer and regular to the speakeasy. That consortium, later dubbed the Murder Trust by newspapers, formulated a plan to make some money off of a new victim. It was Frank who suggested that the victim be Michael. On top of the previously mentioned reasons, it was assumed that Michael's lifestyle had weakened him and he would be easy to kill. Tony would say, quote, "He looks all in. He ain't got much longer to go anyhow. The stuff is getting him." Securing the life insurance policies proved challenging. Frank took charge of the paperwork, introducing Michael as Nicholas Mellery, supposedly a florist. After multiple rejections due to Michael's disheveled appearance, the conspirators realized he couldn't personally appear for applications. Subsequently, it took Frank 5 months and connections with an unscrupulous insurance agent to secure 3 double indemnity policies, 2 with Prudential Life Insurance and 1 with Metropolitan Life Insurance. The Murder Trust ultimately stood to gain $3,576, almost $88,000 today. Even split between multiple conspirators, that sum represented a fortune during a time of widespread financial hardship. Red's responsibility would be to identify the deceased as Nicholas Mellery and claim to be his next of kin and beneficiary. The conspirators' initial plan relied on a deceptively simple strategy: provide Michael with unlimited alcohol until his body surrendered to its toxic effects. In January of 1933, the Murder Trust gathered at Tony's speakeasy to commence their deadly plan. Tony granted Michael an unprecedented open-ended tab, allowing him to drink freely from opening until closing time. Yet after 3 days of continuous consumption, including complimentary sardine sandwiches, Michael showed remarkable stamina, even maintaining his normal ruddy complexion. When he staggered back the 4th day, he simply announced, quote, "Boy, ain't I got a thirst." The frustrated gang then switched tactics. Red, a former chemist, suggested replacing Michael's ordinary liquor with wood alcohol, a substance known to have killed over 50,000 Americans nationwide by 1929, even in concentrations as low as 4%. The main ingredient in wood alcohol is methanol, which is the primary ingredient in paint thinner and is common in antifreeze. Methanol poisoning can easily cause blindness before it causes death, as it normally is metabolized into formaldehyde in the body. But it seemed that Michael's body was not processing the poison the way a normal body would. So Michael consumed several shots of the pure wood alcohol, displaying no unusual symptoms beyond typical inebriation. They didn't just give Michael the wood alcohol right away. They started with shots of impure whiskey and gradually started adding the wood alcohol little by little. Michael drank the shots with no sign that anything was wrong. The following day, he arrived at the speakeasy ready to continue drinking. At that point, Red began pouring him shots of straight wood alcohol, but Michael knocked them back with no issues. On one occasion, he collapsed on the floor and appeared near death with slow, labored breathing. The conspirators gathered around, waiting for his final breath, only to watch in disbelief as the drunkard began snoring, eventually awakening to request, quote, "some of the old regular." As the costs of their murder attempt mounted through alcohol expenses and insurance premiums, the gang turned to food sabotage. Frank suggested soaking oysters in denatured alcohol, claiming that combination would, quote, almost invariably cause acute indigestion. The thought was that he would get an infection and that would end up killing him. Michael, meanwhile, savored each poisoned oyster while washing them down with wood alcohol, licking his fingers and asking for more. Red then prepared what might be called the most lethal sandwich in criminal history. Sardines left out to rot for days, mixed with metal shavings and tin fragments. The conspirators believed the metal would slash through Michael's internal organs, causing a deadly infection. Instead, the man who would eventually be dubbed Iron Mike merely finished his tin sandwich and requested another. Even turpentine, rat poison, and horse liniment failed to subdue their remarkably resilient victim. After the initial poisoning attempts failed, the group escalated to increasingly dangerous methods to eliminate Michael, thereby revealing his extraordinary resilience. On an exceptionally cold winter night, they waited until Michael had drunk himself unconscious, then carried his limp body to Crotona Park, approximately half a mile from the speakeasy. The park's isolated benches provided the perfect setting for their nefarious plan. Tony and Frank opened Michael's shirt, exposing his bare chest to the freezing elements, then mercilessly poured 5 gallons of water over him. With Michael thoroughly soaked and temperatures well below freezing, the conspirators left him to die of exposure, a method Tony had successfully used to murder Mabel Carlson previously. Remarkably, the following morning, Tony discovered Michael in the basement of his speakeasy. Somehow, Iron Mike had regained consciousness, trekked the half-mile back through snow-covered streets, and convinced Red to let him in. When he finally came to, Michael's only complaint was of a wee chill. Once it was revealed that Michael had survived, the frustrated conspirators then enlisted the help of cab driver Harry Green, promising him $150 from the insurance money if he hit and killed their victim with his cab. On January 30th, 1933, they welcomed their victim into the speakeasy and served him all the wood alcohol he wanted. Harry arrived at about 10 p.m. and spent the next few hours drinking. At between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, a couple of men led Michael outside and into Harry's taxi. And then Harry and a number of other people piled into the car and then headed to a deserted area a few miles away. A few men got out of the car with Michael with the plan of holding him up in the road and jumping out of the way at the last second, leaving Michael standing in the path of the oncoming taxi. Harry revved the engine and then started driving down the street, right at Iron Mike. Just a few seconds before impact, a light in a nearby window came on and Harry hit the brakes. Everybody piled back into the cab and they took off. However, they didn't give up. They found an even less populated area and set the fake accident up again. On the first try, Harry missed Michael and almost hit the men who were holding him up, but on the second try, the men pushed Michael in front of the taxi and he was hit. Harry went down the road a ways and started to turn around as he had been instructed to run over Michael if he was still alive. But when he got turned around, he saw that another car had stopped and a man was outside checking on the victim. He drove past Michael and the Good Samaritan and picked up his co-conspirators down the street. They headed home and expected to see news in the paper about a dead body being found on the side of the road, but that headline never surfaced. For weeks they heard nothing from the man and began searching morgues for his body. When they couldn't locate Michael's body, the group came up with a new plan. They started going to speakeasies in other parts of New York to look for a homeless man that fit the description of Michael. They would then kill him and claim the body belonged to the Nicholas Mellery that was on the life insurance policy. The crew ended up finding an unemployed man named Joseph Murray, who they proceeded to get drunk, take out to a deserted road and run over with the taxi, just like they had with Michael. Also, just like with Michael, they were scared away by an oncoming vehicle before they could make sure Joseph was dead. That car either didn't see the victim or didn't care, but they weren't the only other people in the area. The place they had picked for the murder was right by the Mott Haven Feed Company, and there was someone in the building working the night shift. The sound of the car engine made the man look outside, where he saw the taxi run over Joseph and then stop near the body before it drove away. It was there long enough for him to write down the license plate number. Then he called for an ambulance. When Joseph arrived at the hospital, he was not responsive, so his body was searched for identification. The doctor found a business card on him with the name Nicholas Mellery, so that was the name that was put on his chart. He would stay in the hospital for 45 days, but he would end up surviving the ordeal. That time, though, the murder trust would not have to spend any time wondering what had happened to Joseph. By the time Harry returned his taxi to the company garage, there was a note there saying that a detective had called and wanted him to come into the station. Upon arrival, Harry learned from the detective that someone had reported seeing his cab run over a man and that the man had survived and was in the hospital. Harry was questioned and released while the incident was being investigated. Still wanting to collect on their insurance policy, especially since they had spent more than they had planned on alcohol and premiums by that point, the crew started looking for yet another person who could be their Nicholas Mellery. They had worked up a new plan to murder whoever it was they found. They were going to rent a room that had a gas lamp, lead their drunken victim into the room and use the gas to kill them. They would remain nearby so they could make sure the person was actually dead. The only thing they needed was a victim. Then, in mid-February, a heavily bandaged Michael astonishingly reappeared at Tony's speakeasy, requesting a drink. The group gave Michael a few days to settle back into his regular routine, and then they put their new plan into motion. Now, the goal was to make it look like Michael had died of natural causes. Frank had someone lined up to ensure the death certificate listed something natural as the cause of death. Of course, that meant they would not get a higher payout with the double indemnity clause, but they were willing to cut their losses in order to get back at least some of their money. What Tony and his crew didn't know was, though being struck and killed by a car would have qualified as an accidental death, dying from alcohol poisoning, food poisoning, or the infection they were trying to induce wouldn't have. Most of their plans would have never paid out the amount they thought they would get. It was only during their final plan that they were actually aware of that. So on February 22nd, they got Michael drunk and brought him back to the rented room. They connected a hose to the gas fixture and then put the other end in their victim's mouth. They wrapped a towel around Michael's head to secure the tube in place and block his nasal passage. Once the gas was turned on, Iron Mike was breathing nothing but carbon monoxide. That time, the murder trust was successful at killing Michael Malloy. They turned off the gas, took the tube, and left the room. Frank had an associate who was able to help them falsify the death certificate. He paid Dr. Frank Manzella $50 to record the cause of death as lobar pneumonia with alcoholism as a contributing cause rather than asphyxiation by gas. That fabrication allowed the conspirators to bury Michael quickly in a pauper's grave at Ferncliff Cemetery in Westchester County. In an effort to minimize expenses, Frank reportedly declined the $5 embalming fee, a decision that would subsequently prove critical to solving the case. On March 1st, Metropolitan Life Insurance issued an $800 payout check to Red Murphy. The bartender kept $60 for himself before distributing shares to the other conspirators. Yet as Frank attempted to collect on the remaining Prudential policies, the scheme began to unravel. When Prudential's agents requested to see the body and were told it had already been buried, they grew suspicious. Rumors spreading through Bronx speakeasies ultimately triggered the downfall of the trust. The tale of a seemingly indestructible homeless man who survived multiple murder attempts caught the attention of not only local drinkers, but also law enforcement. In May of 1933, authorities exhumed Michael's remains. While the fraudulent death certificate claimed lobar pneumonia as the cause of death, the autopsy revealed carbon monoxide poisoning. The lack of embalming, a cost-saving decision by Frank, preserved crucial evidence. Throughout the investigation, some gang members began talking, with Harry Green expressing dissatisfaction with his share of the money. It ultimately led investigators to the primary members of the murder trust as well as other minor players. The trial commenced at Bronx County Court, where Frank Pasqua, Tony Marino, Daniel Kreisberg, and Joseph Red Murphy were charged with the murder of Michael Malloy for less than $2,000 of insurance. As proceedings unfolded, the conspirators employed various defense strategies, first pleading insanity, then attempting to implicate each other. When those tactics failed, they tried to pin the murder on a local man named Tough Tony, who had been shot dead in an unrelated incident. The courtroom drama intensified as defendants pointed fingers at each other, creating a spectacle that fascinated the press and the public alike. In the end, all four of the conspirators were found guilty of the crime and sentenced to death. On June 7, 1934, Tony, Frank, and Daniel were executed by electric chair at Sing Sing Prison on the same day. Red followed them to the electric chair the next month on July 5th. Harry Green, the taxi driver who had participated in the hit-and-run attempt, received a minimum 10-year sentence for attempted murder, the only member of the murder trust to escape execution. Dr. Frank Manzella served only 3 months for failing to report a suspicious death. As rumors about Mike the Durable circulated through Bronx speakeasies, local newspapers eagerly covered the sensational tale. One reporter poetically observed, quote, "Perhaps the grinning ghost of Mike Malloy was present in the Bronx County Courthouse." The case attracted significant public attention, with citizens following trial developments closely. That fascination stemmed from both the extraordinary resilience Michael displayed and the callous determination of his killers. The press coined the term murder trust to describe the conspirators, thereby creating a narrative that resonated with readers struggling through economic hardship. Michael's legacy influenced popular culture throughout the decades, appearing in radio dramas like The Indestructible Mike Matter in 1956, television adaptations including a 1986 episode of Amazing Stories, and musical tributes such as Primus's 1990 instrumental, You Can't Kill Michael Malloy. Beyond entertainment, Michael's case represents a significant milestone in forensic investigation, as it was among the first cases thoroughly examined by the New York City Medical Examiner's Office. Currently, visitors still leave flowers at his grave in Ferncliff Cemetery, Westchester County, a testament to how this remarkable story continues to resonate with the public. Tony, Frank, Red, and the others who played a role in the plot to kill Michael thought they could make money at the expense of someone else's life. They thought they could find someone who would not be missed, but it turned out there were more people paying attention than they thought. Instead of becoming criminal masterminds, they ended up proving that they were nothing but monsters. Thanks so much for letting me tell you this story. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave a comment. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.